Hi, Alex.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being our first Meet a Maker speaker for the 16 Tech Makerspace community. So congratulations and kudos.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know I was the first.
I think it speaks to just the enthusiasm of the entrepreneur and someone who is a mover and shaker like you are. So, well, if you don't mind, I'd love to embarrass you by asking you to talk about your a little of your background, and we'll get into what you do professionally, what you're doing with Indy Design Week, and then what you might do to blow off steam or otherwise have some fun.
Okay. So my background, I'm a Hoosier, but I've traveled the world. I lived in Wyoming of all places for a little bit. And I went to the two opposing schools. So I did my undergrad at Purdue and my grad degree at IU.
You get some ribbing for that?
Yeah, but I'm not really a sports person, so it didn't really matter to me. And I studied languages and culture in undergrad, which I it led me down a path of like civic service, and so that's how I ended up getting into digital design, was because I was working in the nonprofit world and having to use all these systems, and it was really frustrating, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I ended up designing my own system with my partner, who was a CS major, and I really liked that activity. And I was like, these systems are really bad. This has to be somebody's job, and I think I could do it. and it felt like a way to continue the civic duty that I had been instilled.
I love that. Let's take a little bit of a dive here. A couple of years ago, I had a speaker coming to one of the maker spaces I work with, and they had a background in anthropology. And this was actually 10, 11 years ago. And I had no idea why an anthropologist was in design. And my good friend, who's a lot more talented than I, kind of pulled me aside and said, Alex, before there was design, like UX, like you had to study how people behave. And so there was this real history of people, almost sociologists, anthropologists in UX. So I'm really fascinated to hear that you had a background in civics and language, which makes complete sense if you look at it from the sociological, anthropological point of view. But B, I love that you're in design and tech, which may not have been what you went to school for. And it just speaks to how people can pursue their passions these days and learn what they need, maybe after school even, and find their new career. So could you talk for just a few seconds about how language and civics got you into design, and how did you learn design for anyone else who might be interested in exploring a new career?
Yeah, so studying languages and culture really gave me, at the time I thought like, oh, this is not really what I should have done, because I didn't see a path to a career. I didn't want to work for the government. I didn't have any money to go into like humanitarian aid or like diplomacy. And so that's why I went into AmeriCorps and found a path of giving back and a duty of like civic duty. And so what I discovered in going down the path of design was that was a really solid foundation for understanding people and context and the way people communicate, and the necessity of context of use, and how a language or a person can change in different contexts. And so, but going into design school, so I kind of stumbled into it as well. All I knew was information architecture.
Okay.
And so I went to school for library and information science because they had a class in information architecture, and I was like, well, I could make that work. And then I got an internship right away. It was unpaid, and I don't normally promote that, but it was so monumental for me in gaining experience and actually changing my path, because it was a UX internship, and I rearranged my classes to kind of partner off of one another. So that's how I found like research methods for human computer interaction design, and I loved it because it just went perfectly with what I was studying with linguistics, but in a more applicable way. Like the reason why I wanted to go into technology and design, I didn't know it was design. I just didn't even know that was an option. But I wanted to go into that path to make a difference for people's lives. I wanted to be at the front end of the world changing and people adapting to the world to fit what they need.
You know, and you hit a couple of things that I really appreciate. Since this is a Meet a Maker series, and since I'm passionate about making, I think a common thread among many people I meet in the maker culture is that pay it forward, help others, that kind of social or civic minded duty. And we see that in makerspaces, you know, over the last month or so with the you know, tragic COVID crisis and stay at home and lack of personal protective equipment. You see people making you know, face shields or masks with their 3D printers and using design to help people you know, all over the world. So that kind of pay it forward aspect doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But let's take a step back and define what, you know, user experience or user design. And let me also just remind people about your title, your Senior Interaction Designer for SEP. So what does that mean? What's SEP, and what do you like about all of that?
Yeah, so interaction design is a part of the UX umbrella as it's defined by the whole field. But so at SEP, it's a part of our UX team, and SEP stands for Software Engineering Professionals. It's a 30-year-old software consulting firm, and we build products that are essential to somebody's business. And so as an interaction designer, I'm responsible for studying the landscape from a business need, a market need, a user need, and then making sure I can fit all of that together to create something that fits all of those cases and is still on budget, on time, and validated, right? And that's really important as well. And so what interaction designers do, I like to say that we're kind of like a digital architect, not in the software coding perspective, but as an architect will outline buildings and think about the use of space, how people move through space. Somebody like me does that for digital products.
That's really fascinating. And I think for me, I used to write software. I was often given a piece of a task to do, and now running a couple businesses, that 30,000 foot view and understanding how this piece needs to talk to that piece, often I find myself stuck trying to get legacy tools or legacy processes or systems that I've been using for no good reason, trying to make them talk to each other. And it would be a beautiful privilege to be able to start with a clean slate and say, hey, how do I want this to operate, and to architect it. So that sounds like a really rewarding and cool job.
Yeah, we get legacy systems as well, for sure. But we'll always start with like, how do we want it to be, so that we can maybe work backwards from there and do some forecasting to get there.
And I'm sure that has to do with your on time, on budget, on spec. You know, you can't have everything. You know, it's the pick two of the three. But I also loved a phrase that you use to describe some of your work, designing delightful and usable products. So I love that it's not just usable, but delight isn't often a word I hear associated with software or the user experience, but I love that you start there.
Yeah, it's really important to me to bring in an element of the products I tend to work on are usually for somebody's work environment. They have to use this piece of software. And so when that's the case, they don't have a choice. They're in it more often than a consumer product. And I find a strong responsibility to make their lives a little bit better, right, by using it. And if we can offer some element of delight or ease of use beyond usability, right, like just base usability, if we can take it the next step, then we have a duty to do so.
You know, I would like to write a blog post about the ethics of design. And the fact that, in my opinion, life and the world are challenging. Yeah, and we all know that, especially right now. Technology, in my opinion, makes life easier or more fun. And so if you can make good technology, if you can design good technology, you're making, you can do the same thing in less time or for fewer resources, and you free up people's either time or resources to do whatever else they want. And I think that that is an ethical thing. But
yeah, there are a few people that are talking about that now and have different, like, opposing philosophies in some ways. There's Mike Montero, who talks about design ethics, and he takes a kind, well, they both take a hard stance. And Alan Cooper has his concept of ancestral design. So both of those are thinking about that we're designing for a system, and that system is continuously changing, and it's a system within systems, and there are all these interdependencies that may be unseen. And so we have to consider what are the downstream effects of whatever it is we're doing, and imagine what those might be, so that we can be ethical in the interventions that we're proposing in the world, because we're always changing the system.
I know plenty of people who work in the financial industry or banks, and they just curse at the software on the terminal in front of them and wished it had been better designed. So who are some of your customers, or what are some of the kinds of products that roll out?
I can talk about some customers, and then others I'll have to be more vague about. So some of them are like Forum, Bank, and Blackboard, an e-learning management system.
Cool.
And then others are that I have to be more ambiguous about are like Fortune 200 pharmaceutical companies, or large scale agricultural manufacturers.
I see.
And so building interfaces for inside of machines, and then also for the management of those machines, even if they're like, maybe you're managing a whole fleet, what that might look like. And then also some other medical software. Yeah.
Well, and I love your comment too, that, so I'm guessing these are people who might be employed by big companies who are sitting at their desk and they're there for 8 hours and they're using your software. So your comment about how they spend more time with it than like a consumer product. If I use an app, maybe I'm in Facebook for half hour, maybe I'm using my photo app for a few minutes, but it's not the, all day, every day. So I absolutely see that value. And I also like to expand the definition of who a maker is. So often I started a makerspace, and it did a lot of woodworking and welding and 3D printing. And people often associate those kind of physical making things with a makerspace. But I consider, making a web app, making a website, making a business. I'm enough of a cheeseball to say making a friend is making. And I think that's all part of the maker culture, maker community. And you also say that you're big on community building. So I'd be curious to hear about how you took your passion and started things like Indy Design Week, or any other communities you're interested in talking about.
Sure. So it definitely does drive from a really like an inner fire of being a creator in some ways, in many ways. And what does creation look like? For me, I've always wanted to connect people and bring I always want to bring people together, and like, oh, this person knows that thing, and this thing, and you guys could work together on something. And so it's evolved over the years into something like Indy Design Week. But it started, well, I guess it started when I got into hula hooping and the flow arts and the fire community.
Let's take a half a step back. Say that a little more slowly, please.
Okay, so there's this community of people, of performance artists, that is called flow arts, and it's a part of circus arts. And so there's things like hula hooping for adults, right? It's like hula hooping for adults, and there a lot of different ways you can take that. And then all these other different props. It's also called prop manipulation, jugglers, all these kind of movement artists with something else. sometimes it gets translated into acro yoga, like acrobatics, like
Mm.
you're manipulating another person in air and stuff, and also aerial silks. So, or the aerial acrobatics and aerial arts. So, I found hula hooping when I was studying design, and it seemed to match perfectly because I was able to get outside of my body and actually embody this concept of flow and be able to understand what that meant, from a physical perspective. And then I could think about it from a design and systems perspective, which was really fun. And so when I joined that community, I ended up turning my thesis, like for grad school, to focus on it. And I was like, well, how can technology support this community, and what do people need? And so I ended up taking that long path, and I ended up working for the Flow Arts Institute and helped them, as the largest international organization that puts on 7 fire events stemmed out of Burning Man, things like that. But and so I started there. I cut my teeth on event planning. I started my own festival.
No way.
But like artists are, it's like in the art world, there's it's like this, there isn't as much commitment in some ways, right, as you do in the more professional world. And I have so many passions. I decided to, okay, I'm just gonna teach now. I'll teach aerial arts, and I will put all of my community building towards design, because I think that's where the greatest impact can be made, especially here in Indianapolis.
That's really fascinating, and I sympathize. My sister is an artist, and she's the one who inspired me to actually get my hands dirty and make physical goods. She's a metal sculptor and a jeweler, different mindsets. And this is why I really do enjoy a community that has a diverse collection of people, because innovation lives at the edges and overlapping intersections of people with different perceptions, perspectives, ideas, and talents. I also love that you said you wanted to look at hula hooping from a design and systems point of view. I never expected that sentence to come out of someone's mouth, but I love it. Well, tell us more about, well, first off, what was the name of the festival you created?
It's called Flow Motion Symposium. It's down in Bloomington, and it's still ongoing.
Oh, congrats. That's cool.
I just stepped away. I'm an emeritus.
Well, hey, it's a special talent to create things that live on without you. I think that's a big value. But tell us more about Indy Design Week and who its community is for, who's speaking, how people can get involved.
Yeah, so Indy Design Week, this is its 3rd year, and it's evolved over time. And we really aim to be a place for all design disciplines in the greater Indianapolis area to merge, blend, and learn from one another. We create a whole week of events to serve each subset of community and then bring everyone together on the central stage. So we have a master designer, Rick Valicenti, who's actually speaking twice. And we have some really cool projects with the Columbus Design Institute. So that's Columbus, Indiana. And they are working with several people from Bloomington, Columbus, and Indianapolis to talk all around central issues, to think about what life might be like post-crisis, and having some designers come in and talk about that as well, and then some workshop activities from there. We also have an illustration throwdown. So this is going to be like a live illustration battle, and there'll be one winner.
I'm really curious. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and then we have a few panels. So High Alpha is going to be talking about the design of businesses and how they approach that. Ratio is bringing people from the built environment together and talking about what the future of that space might look like.
Forgive me, what is the built environment?
So thinking about architecture, urban planning, interior design, and then maybe business development. those four sectors intercede to create the cities that we live in.
Okay, cool.
And so that's the space that Ratio work in. And then one of our keynote speakers, Kara Weber, who's also a member of the AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, I think. She's going to be a part of that panel as well. And let's see, yeah, there's a lot going on. We're having a virtual happy hour.
Oh, when is that?
That's on Thursday night, May 7th, and Hotel Tango is sponsoring.
Oh, thank you, Hotel Tango. And let's say, when does Indy Design Week start? And if people are interested in getting involved or buying tickets or attending the events, where can they find that out?
Yeah, so Indy Design Week is May 4th through May 8th, and we have events every day. I did forget to mention our virtual concert that'll cap off the week.
Oh, very cool.
And you can go to indydesignweek.com for all the information. The schedule's up there. It'll take you to get tickets. We also understand that it's a really weird time financially for so many people. And if you can't afford a full price ticket, there's a pay what you can option. So don't be shy in using that. We want as many people to take part in the learning and connecting. So that's what we're here for.
And in fact, you've changed the whole format of the week to be virtual this week, haven't you?
We did, yeah. So it's 100% remote. Everyone is just doing what we can, and it's all new for us.
Yeah.
We've really taken a hard look at how we can try, like, there's no replication for a face-to-face interaction or water cooler conversations you might have at a conference, but we're really trying to create spaces, even digitally, that remind you of the presence of others and allow for more intimate connections to occur. So we have a few different ways we're doing that.
Yeah, kudos again on pivoting so quickly, because this has been planned for a while, and I think you decided to take it all virtually just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think we'll pull it off. It's I mean, I know we will. We'll pull it off.
And I've been glad. I'm grateful to be one of the speakers, and it was delightful recording our presentation. And I look forward to hosting the interactive workshop on design also. So.
Yes.
I'll include a few of these details, web links and such, in the comments of this video. But let's see, what were a few of the other things that I wanted to ask you about? Well, you mentioned it's in its third year. Have you noticed, and I'm putting you a little on the spot here, were there any really interesting products that came out of the illustration throwdown, or any collaborations that lived past Indy Design Week, or who are some of the people who attend, and things like that?
Yeah, so because of my bent in interaction design, I also run the Interaction Design Association for Indianapolis. And so it kind of came out of IXDA and AIGA partnering of sorts. So there's a heavy bent towards graphic design and digital design, but we're ever expanding to include architects, industrial designers, and we want to make a space for everyone. So something that came out of last year, which was really nice to hear, was that a bunch of people from Salesforce attended, and they were so inspired that they formed, I did a leadership workshop there where I wanted to bring in a bunch of leaders around, like from all of these companies in the city, to talk about how we might shape the landscape. Like, what does Indianapolis need in order to grow and be a desirable place for designers to stay, live, and work?
That's a great question.
And out of that, they formed their own committee around that question as well.
Very cool, very cool.
And I didn't know that until just a few months ago, but that was really exciting to hear that this had some like lasting impact there. And I've heard of people getting jobs from the connections that they've made here, or even just a better friends, right? Or maybe not better friends. All friends are good.
Nothing wrong with more friends.
More friends.
And I appreciate the heavy bent on design, because I do evangelize so much physical making, laser cutter, CNC machining, 3D printing, I tell people, the bottleneck isn't how to use these tools. The bottleneck is the design for these tools. And so graphic artists, illustrators, they're fabricators now. Their world, of course, can still live on paper or on a website or in some digital graphic asset, or it can be something you physically create and hang on a wall or turn into sculpture or a product. So I'm really keen to meet some of those designers. But
I think it's so important as we advance in the evolution of our digital lives that we bring physicality back into the mix. Yeah. So like IoT is like it's the big thing. Like we have to go that route. Like we have to think about how do we embed these new ways of being into our actual lived lives.
Yeah. I'm part of a fashion-based makerspace in Columbus, Ohio, where it's not just conventional clothing and fashion, but it's also the technology behind it. So, like you say, sensors in your shoes or interactive lights or other mechatronics in what you wear. And I never understood what a vector to technology fashion design can be also. So you sketch something in 3D and then you unfold it into a 2D laser cuttable or vinyl cuttable pattern and then imbue it with amazing tech and fun. So really, really cool. The other
you have a fashion designer speaking as well.
Oh, I'm looking forward to meeting them. Cool.
Yeah.
Do you know what their topic is or what their area of interest is?
Yeah, so they're talking about how COVID has actually made them more of a creator. And so the whole talk is around how this is the year of creators because we're experiencing all these problems and how fashion is going to have an impact, how creators as a whole are going to have an impact in our lives moving forward.
Really fascinating. I look forward to hearing all these talks.
Yeah, she runs Indiana Fashion Design Week. So that's
great. And that's another reason to just understand what other energy and such is going on. So from your perch, what other resources are there in Indy if someone were a designer or wanted to create something that was bottlenecked by design? Other conferences, festivals, resources, service providers, subreddits, Facebook groups. Like I know there are lots of siloed communities that can be very active in their own digital walls and occasionally coffee or happy hours or things like that. And I'm really passionate about, like you were talking about, connecting those groups and then finding the fun that happens. So if anything off the top of your head comes to, that you should want others to know about, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, part of the reason for starting Indy Design Week was that I was having trouble as being someone new to the city is finding these groups, finding where my people might be and where I could learn from them and take part in the community. So there's creative mornings. There's also Art Speak, which is they do pop-up art shows all over.
Cool.
And on Instagram, you can find there's this like illustration group that gets together in bars when we can. And let's see, I mean, there's IXDA. Did I say AIGA?
I think you said that that Indy Design Week was born from those two together.
Right.
And I'll collect a few of these and again put them in the comments of our talk.
And then there are spaces that support people that are working, like the Speakeasy and the Indiana IoT Lab, which is up in Fishers. They're a great space. But in terms of other resources, like there are some Facebook groups for like artists, right? So there's the Women of Indianapolis Arts, which is a really active group. But all in all, we're trying to bring people together into our Slack group so that it makes more of these events easier to find.
Yep. Very cool. I appreciate it. Let's see. I think we're coming up on our 30 or 40 minutes, I was going to ask, I wanted to know what other kind of quirky or eccentric or interesting things you do to blow off steam, but hearing about teaching aerial and all that was fun.
We can't do that now.
Yeah, any other things you wanted to let people know about? What was Indy Coffee Box? I'm curious about that.
Oh, right. So Indy Coffee Box is a company started with my husband, and we work with local roasters who only use specialty coffee. So it's high grade coffee, kind of like how your wine is graded, like coffee is graded the same way. And we make sure it's traceable. And so we rotate, so it's hand delivered to somebody like yourself every month. And we rotate the selection. So it's all a curated box of really delicious coffee.
Oh, that's fantastic. Years ago, and I'll have to find the quote before I put it in the comment, I remember reading about some mathematician who said that mathematicians are just engines that convert coffee into theorems. And I think that, makerspaces and creative communities are just engines that convert coffee into art and software and business. So thanks for keeping that pump primed.
Yeah, I'm just so excited for 16 Tech to come downtown because I feel like it's gonna provide some real energy for the community, and really excited.
Hey, we're excited too, and I can't think of a better note to end on. So thank you very much, and look forward to attending Indy Design Week next week. Cool. Thanks for doing this, Poppy.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Take care.
Bye.